I came home from the hospital to find my front door locks changed. There was a sticky note where the keyhole used to be. My son-in-law's handwriting. Dad moved in. We needed the space. Your stuff is in the garage. Call before you come next time. I stood on my own porch for a long time. The November air off Lake Ontario was cold enough to bite through my jacket. I had the original house key in my hand, the one I'd had copied at the hardware store on Dundas back in 1987, and it no longer fit anything. My wife Eleanor had died in this house. I'd brought both my kids home from the hospital to this house. I'd repainted the kitchen 3 times and replaced the roof once, and spent 32 years paying down the mortgage on this house. My name was the only name on the title. I didn't call the police that night. I want to be clear about that, because later people would ask me why I didn't, and the honest answer is that I wasn't ready. I was 63 years old. I'd just driven 4 hours back from Sudbury, where I'd been helping my younger brother recover from hip surgery, and I was tired in a way that went deeper than sleep could fix. I sat in my car in my own driveway, and I looked at the lights on inside my house, and I tried to understand what was happening. My daughter came to the front window at some point and saw me. She turned away before I could lift my hand. I drove to a Tim Hortons on the main road and ordered a large coffee and sat there until they started sweeping around my table. My son-in-law, Trevor. No, wait, that was already. My son-in-law's name was Callum. Callum Reeves. He'd been married to my daughter Sonia for 6 years. He was a project coordinator for a construction company in Mississauga, and he had the kind of confidence that comes from never having been wrong out loud. From the beginning, he'd called me by my first name, Angus, which I didn't mind, but he said it in a particular way, like he was reminding me of something. For the first 3 years, things were fine. Sonia and Callum lived in a rental in Brampton, and I saw them most Sundays. We watched hockey together. Callum liked to talk about real estate, and I'd nod along. Then the rental market went where it went, and Callum's father, a man named Dex, lost his apartment in Etobicoke when the building was sold for condo conversion. Dex was 68, and between pension checks and getting by on very little. Sonia called me in July and asked if Callum's father could stay with us, with me, for a few months. She phrased it that way, with us, as though she still lived there. I said yes. I want to own that. I said yes because Dex was an old man with nowhere to go and I had a spare room. I made up the bed in what had been my son Marcus's old room. Marcus lives in Victoria now, works in tech, barely visits, and I cleared out half the closet and I put fresh towels in the bathroom. Dex moved in on a Saturday in August. He was quieter than I expected. We watched the news together in the evenings. He offered to pay me something and I said not to worry about it. It wasn't perfect, but it was fine. What I didn't understand then was that a few months was never the real plan. I'd been looking after my brother in Sudbury for 5 weeks. His surgery had complications, a nerve issue that made rehab slower than expected, and he had no one else close by. I drove up in late September with a bag and a plan to stay 2 or 3 weeks. It stretched. I called Sonia every few days. She told me everything was fine. She told me Dex was comfortable and the house was good. I came home the first weekend of November. The locks had been changed. I found out later, through a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear, that they'd moved Dex out of Marcus's old room within 2 weeks of me leaving. Moved him into my bedroom, my room, my wife's old dresser, her mirror still hanging above it, her reading lamp. Dex was sleeping in there while I was 5 hours north, thinking everything was fine. My tools had been moved into the garage to make room for a small sitting area Callum set up for Dex in the basement. My files, tax returns, the house documents, my wife Dorothy's death certificate, our old photographs, had been put in cardboard boxes and stacked on the shelving unit beside my lawnmower. Sonia told me later that it was temporary. That word again. I spent 2 nights in a motel on the highway, a Holiday Inn Express. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm telling you because it's the truth. I was 63 years old, and I was in a motel 11 minutes from my own house. Because my daughter's husband had changed the locks, I used those 2 nights to think clearly. The first thing I did was call my family lawyer, a woman named Patricia Chen who had handled Dorothy's estate and who I'd known for almost 15 years. I reached her assistant on the Monday morning. Patricia called me back within the hour. I told her everything, the lock change, the room, the boxes in the garage. She listened without interrupting. When I was done, she said, "Angus, he has no legal standing here. This is your property. What he's done is unauthorized change of access to a home he has no ownership interest in. She paused. You could have called the police and had them removed that first night. I knew that, but knowing it and doing it are different things when your daughter is standing on the other side of the door. Patricia drafted a letter that afternoon. A formal letter citing the Ontario Residential Tenancies Act and clarifying that no tenancy agreement existed for either Callum, Sonia, or Dex Reeves. The letter stated that the property at the address had one registered owner. The letter requested that access be restored within 48 hours and that any alterations to locks or fixtures be reversed at the occupant's expense. She also told me to document everything, every box, every moved item, every alteration. I drove to the house on Tuesday morning with a locksmith. I'd called ahead and Sonia answered. She sounded confused at first, then quiet in the way she gets when she knows she's done something she can't easily undo. Dad, can we just talk about this? We can talk after. The locksmith rekeyed the front door and the side entry in 20 minutes. I paid him in cash. He didn't ask questions. Callum wasn't home. He was at work. I found out later that Sonia had called him, and he'd said he'd deal with it tonight. He didn't understand yet what was happening. I walked through my house for the first time in 5 weeks. My bedroom smelled like someone else. Dex's cardigan was on the hook behind the door. There was a pill organizer on Dorothy's nightstand. I stood in the doorway for a moment, and then I walked back out. I didn't say anything to Dex. He was in the kitchen when I walked through. He looked at me and looked away, and I thought he probably knew, in the way decent people know when they've been placed in a situation they didn't fully choose. I'm sorry about this, Dex, I said. He nodded. Your daughter said it was all right. It wasn't her call to make. Callum came home at 6. I heard his truck in the driveway. He came through the side door, which now didn't open with his key, and knocked. I let him in. He was not expecting me to be calm. I could see that in his face. He was ready for something louder. Angus. He looked around the kitchen like he was assessing a job site. Look, I know this seems. Sit down, Callum. He sat. Sonia was already at the table. She hadn't looked at me directly since I'd arrived. I put Patricia's letter on the table and I pushed it across to him. He read it. He read it again. The color in his face shifted through a few things. This is aggressive, he said. It's a letter from my lawyer explaining my legal rights in my own home. If you find that aggressive, I'm not sure what to tell you. Dad, we were just trying to help Dex. Then let's talk about Dex, I said. I kept my voice flat. I'd had 48 hours to think about how I wanted this conversation to go, and I'd decided that the moment I raised my voice, I would lose something I didn't want to lose. Dex is welcome to stay in Marcus's room. That's where I put him in August. You had no reason to move him. He needed more space. He had a full room with a closet. What he didn't need was my bedroom. Callum put the letter down. He leaned back in his chair. He had that look men get when they're deciding whether to push or recalibrate. You were gone for over a month. The house needed someone managing it. We were doing you a favor. I looked at my daughter when he said that. She was looking at the table. Callum, I said, I've been managing this house since before you were born. My name is on the title. My wife died in this house. The only favor I need from you is for you to understand that you made a decision that wasn't yours to make. He didn't say anything. I want my bedroom back by this weekend. I want my files and documents brought in from the garage and returned to my office. And I want the receipt for the locksmith you hired so I can deduct it from whatever arrangement we make going forward. What arrangement? If Dex is staying, and I'm not saying he can't stay, we discuss terms, reasonable terms, in writing, through my lawyer. Callum looked at me for a long moment. You're making this into a legal thing. You changed the locks on my house, Callum. You put my belongings in boxes in my garage. You moved another man into my bedroom without asking me. I folded my hands on the table. You made it a legal thing. He pushed back, of course. That's who Callum was. He didn't yell. I'll give him that. But he spent the next week making everything as difficult as he could. He told Sonia I was being unreasonable. He told Dex that the situation was complicated. He sent me a text message at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night that said simply, "You should think about what kind of relationship you want with your daughter." I forwarded it to Patricia. What Callum hadn't thought through, and this is the part that I've reflected on a great deal since, was that he had no leverage. None. He and Sonia were not on the mortgage. They were not on the title. They paid no rent and had signed no lease. Under Ontario law, they were occupants at the pleasure of the registered owner, which was me. Patricia sent a second letter. This one was more direct. It outlined the legal definition of their occupancy status, noted the unauthorized lock change as a breach of the owner's right of access, and requested that all parties vacate the master bedroom within 72 hours, or she would be filing an application with the landlord and tenant board. Not as tenants, but to formalize a notice of trespass. Callum called me after he received it. He was quieter this time. "Is this really what you want? I want my house back in the condition I left it. Sonia is going to be devastated. Sonia is an adult. Her choices have consequences, as do yours." There was a long pause. "Fine," he said. "We'll move Dex back to the other room. Thank you, but I want you to know, Callum, I don't need a closing statement. Just move him." Dex was back in Marcus's old room by Sunday. My bedroom was restored, or as close to it as it could be. Someone had moved Dorothy's nightstand slightly, and I moved it back myself, alone, with the door closed. That took longer than it should have. My daughter came to find me afterward. She stood in the doorway the way she used to when she was a teenager with something difficult to say and no idea how to start. I was putting Dorothy's reading lamp back where it belonged. "Dad, Sonia, I know I should have called you. You should have said no when he suggested it." I set the lamp down. "That's what I keep coming back to, not the logistics. The fact that you knew what this room was and you said yes anyway." She didn't argue with that. That was something, at least. "Callum said it was just temporary, that you wouldn't even notice if what? If I what?" She stopped. I turned around. She was crying a little. I wanted to be moved by it. I was moved by it, but I also needed her to understand something I didn't know how to put gently. "Your mother spent 40 years in this house. She died in that room. I know that's heavy, Sonia. I know you carry that too, but that room is not empty space to be reassigned. It's not a resource to optimize. It's where I live." I paused. "I'm still your father, I'm still here, but I need you to see me that way, not as a problem to manage." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "I'm sorry, Dad." I believed her. I believed she meant it. I also knew it would take longer than an apology to actually rebuild what the past few months had bent. I should explain something about the $3,000. When I came back from Sudbury the first time, briefly in early October, just for a weekend, the roof above the garage was leaking. Callum mentioned it like it was an inconvenience rather than a structural concern. He said he knew a contractor and could get it looked at. He said it would probably run around $3,000. I wrote him a check. I know how that looks. People have told me how it looks. But I want you to understand something. The check wasn't trust. It was rope. I know that sounds cold. Maybe it is. But I'd already noticed by that point that something wasn't right in my house. The way Dex avoided my eyes. The way certain things had been shifted and never shifted back. I didn't have the full picture yet, but I had the feeling. And when someone is in the process of taking something from you, sometimes the most useful thing you can do is let them think you don't see it yet. Callum cashed that check on October 14th. He did not hire a contractor. The garage roof still leaked when I got home in November. I have the bank record, and I have photographs of the leak dated November 3rd. Patricia added it to the file. The conversation I'd been dreading had nothing to do with Callum. It was a Tuesday evening in late November. Dex knocked on my office door. I said, "Come in." He sat down in the chair across from my desk, the same chair where I used to sit when Dorothy helped me with our taxes on this exact desk, and he put his hands on his knees. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You don't." "I do." He looked at me steadily. He was 68, maybe 69. He had the look of a man who'd spent a lot of time around job sites and not enough time sitting still. I knew after the first week that I was in the wrong room. "Callum told me you'd said it was fine. I knew that wasn't likely true." He paused. "I should have said something. You were in a difficult spot." "I was a coward," he said plainly. "I needed the place, and I let myself believe what was convenient." He looked at his hands. "That's not who I want to be." I thought about that for a moment. "Dex," I said, "the room you're in now is a perfectly good room. It's warm. It gets morning light. The closet is full size." I leaned back in my chair. "If you want to stay, under terms we actually discuss, like adults, the room is yours for as long as you need it." He looked up. He seemed surprised. "I'd pay you rent," he said carefully. $800 a month, utilities included. That's fair for the area." He nodded. That's more than fair. It's what the room is worth, I said. Neither more nor less. Callum and Sonia found a place in Hamilton in December. It wasn't the neighborhood they wanted at the price they wanted, but the rental market was what it was, and they didn't have many options. Callum went quiet for a few weeks after they moved out. No texts, no calls. Sonia called me on Christmas Eve from their new apartment. She sounded tired. How's the house? Good, I said. Dex made a turkey. She laughed a little. It was the first time I'd heard her laugh in months. Dad, is it weird? Having a stranger there? He's not a stranger anymore. There was a pause. Callum says you're holding a grudge. I'm not holding anything, Sonia. I'm just done pretending things were fine when they weren't. I kept my voice steady. You can come and visit whenever you want, both of you. The door is open. The locks work. She went quiet at that. I hadn't meant it as a dig, but I understood why it landed that way. We'll come for New Year's, she said finally. I'll make sure there's room. Marcus flew in from Victoria in January. He hadn't heard any of this, not properly. I'd kept the calls short while it was happening because I didn't want him to feel obligated to fix something from 3,000 kilometers away. But he called in December and I told him, and he booked a flight. He sat in my kitchen for 2 hours listening. He asked the questions I would have asked. He went quiet in the places where quiet was the right response. At the end he said, I should have visited more. You have a life, Marcus. That's not an excuse, it's a fact. Doesn't mean it's a good one. He looked around the kitchen. The house looks the same. I repainted the trim in October. Before all this, he nodded. Looks good. We watched the Leafs lose that night, which is a Canadian tradition as reliable as anything in the criminal code. Dex joined us in the second period, which Marcus handled with more grace than I expected. By the third period, they were arguing about the power play, and I was in the kitchen making tea, and I thought, this is something. Not what I planned, not what I would have chosen, but something. Patricia sent me the final accounting in February. The $3,000 Callum had taken, misappropriated, she called it, which is the legal term for what it was recoverable through small claims court. We filed. Callum didn't contest it, in the end. He paid it back in 2 installments, the second one arriving on March 8th, which would have been Dorothy's birthday. I don't know if that timing was accidental, or if the universe just enjoys a certain kind of irony. The locksmith fee, too, paid back, $180. Patricia charged me more than that to recover it, but that wasn't the point. Sonia and Callum did come for New Year's. It was awkward in the specific way that holidays are awkward when everyone in the room is carrying something unresolved. We ate well. Callum helped me with the dishes without being asked, which was new. He didn't say much, but at the end of the night, standing in the front hall putting on his coat, he said, I know I made a mistake, Angus. I said, I know you know. That was all. Sonia hugged me at the door. She held on a little longer than usual. I let her. After they left, Dex was cleaning up in the kitchen, and I sat at the table with the last of my ginger ale. The house was quiet in the way it gets after people leave, full of their absence rather than empty of their presence, if that distinction means anything to you. Good night? Dex asked. Good night, I said. Getting there. He nodded and turned off the kitchen light. I sat there for a moment in the dark, my house around me, the furnace ticking, the lake wind working at the windows the way it does every January. The same sounds it's made for 30 years. I got up. I checked the locks, the new ones, the ones I'd chosen myself. I turned off the hall light. I walked up the stairs to my room, and I closed the door behind me.